Hi, today's guitar book review is on this one. It's called The Sounds Book of the Electric Guitar. Now, you might be able to tell from looking at it that this is quite an old one. This was published in 1980. I don't know much about it. I don't think I got it when it first came out. I probably got my first guitar around 1980, but I wasn't into electric guitar at that point, and for sort of 3 or 4 years. So I probably got this book as a second-hand book when I got into playing electric guitar. So I probably got this 1984, 85, something like that. I certainly have had it for a long time. And when I was a teenager, I probably read this book more than any other book, and I'm really into books, but this is probably my book that for sort of a period of 5 or 6 years I read the most by a long way. I haven't looked at this much for about 30 years, but looking at it now, I know every single little bit of it. Just glancing through it, I recognise everything in it. I just looked at this over and over again. Now it's really interesting to read as a historical kind of thing because it's from 1980. I mean, there's an advert for Gibson in here, and there's a picture of B.B. King looking quite young. And the kind of guitars that are advertised and that are talked about in here, it's interesting looking at it now. BC Rich feature a lot in this book, so do Gibson. Well, Gibson is still a big name now. BC Rich probably less so, but when this was first out, there's even a BC Rich on the front. Washburn in here a lot. I know Washburn are still around, but their electric guitars were obviously really being pushed at the time. There's interesting articles in here where people are talking about sort of the emergence of Japanese guitars and how good the quality was, but how they didn't have the name that the American ones had. There's a paragraph somewhere in here, I'm not sure where, but where like a guitar expert is saying how these Japanese guitars are so good, and there's some good innovations coming from Japan, like active electrics and things like that. And he was saying that it's not balanced, the sort of the guitar market at the time. It was all American guitars, but these Japanese ones were just sort of coming through. And this guy was saying that he thought that balance would be sort of regressed at some point, which it kind of has. I mean, now 80s Japanese guitars are quite sort of highly sought after. So it's interesting. For me, it was good because one of the Gibson guitars that's featured is a guitar called the Paul, which was a budget Les Paul they made in the late 70s. Well, my first decent electric guitar was a Gibson the Paul, which I got in about 1987, I think. 1987, 88, something like that. 87, yeah. So there's a picture of a guitar like the one I had in here, and there's a whole write-up of that. There's quite a few Gibsons actually. They go through the main kind of makes, so Fender's in there, Gibson's in there, and they just talk about certain models in quite detail. But there's some that you just wouldn't expect now. I mean, there's Ibanez, which you would expect. Kawai, I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce that. I remember them being around, and I think they made keyboards as well. I think they got more into keyboards than guitars, if I'm thinking of the right company. But some interesting guitars they made, K guitars. They were sort of around late 70s, early 80s, and so there's a bit about them. So it's a really interesting book for anyone that's old enough to have been a guitarist when this came out, to look back and remember some of these old guitars. There's an interview with a West End guitar dealer, and you can see in the photos, there's just a photo of a couple of guitars here. This is a photo of one guitar in particular with some others that you can just see around it. The one in the middle is a Gibson RD standard, £399. I think that would have been a new guitar then. But just next to it, just down here, there's a guitar you can just see the label. It's 1957 Les Paul Junior, £450. That kind of stuff's interesting if you're really into guitars like I am. That guitar wouldn't be £450 now. So yeah, it's a really good book, but for me, a lot of it's nostalgia really. I just read this so much, so it's interesting looking at it now. But it'd be nice to know if someone else has got this book or remembers this book, and someone else may have had it and remember a bit more about where it came from. It says the Sounds Book of the Electric Guitar. I haven't researched this at all before coming on here, but I assume Sounds is maybe a magazine or something, but I don't know. Perhaps you could tell me in the comments if you know. Yeah, so really good one. Cost £1.50 originally, apparently. Yeah, if you can get a copy of this and you're interested in guitars and buying guitars and things now, this isn't going to be much use or of any interest. But if you're just interested to look back and see what things cost at the time and what kind of guitars were around in 1980, then it's a really interesting one. Okay, so that's the Sounds Book of the Electric Guitar. It's compiled by Tony Mitchell. Okay, thanks.